Hello, all you wonderful people out there in internet land. It is time for a live stream of the SMC Journal podcast this Friday, September the 6th. I am Scott Moore, your host. Thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be a special show, and the reason why is because we are going to talk about a current event that it's still going. Hang on just one second. I got some volume issues here. There we go. So we're going to talk about an event that just happened. It's still ongoing. The ramifications of this event are still ongoing. If you are in the UK or you are a fan of the band Oasis and you tried to buy some tickets over the US Labor Day holiday, September the 1st, August 31st, you probably had problems and you probably weren't very happy. Ticketmaster is facing a lot of problems right now in the public with not only fans that are angry at them, people trying to buy tickets for bad user experience, or there's now actually investigations going on to look at them as a monopoly and see if they should be broken up or not. This is serious stuff. So we're going to be discussing this from the perspective of performance engineering, software engineering, development, software development, and what can it's not this show is not about just to poke the bear of Ticketmaster, although they probably deserve a little bit of that, but it's about seeing how can we actually help you as performance engineers. I have let's go ahead and get the legal stuff out of the way because I don't want to get sued here. I have no inside information about how Ticketmaster runs their IT shop. I don't know what their technology stack is other than what they display publicly. I have no insider knowledge to any of this stuff. I can only tell you what I see on Twitter, the experience that people have had that I know who tried to buy tickets, people who reported on social media, and try to take a balanced approach. I've looked at the errors that have been posted as well that people received. And what we can do is say, if as a performance engineer, if I had experienced this as consulting with a company and they were reporting to me, Scott, we need help, we're having problems with this, what would I do to help them correct that problem? That's kind of where we want to go with this today. We do have this streaming live across YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Soon we will have Twitter back again, but we're streaming across all these platforms. So if you're seeing me on those platforms, there is a chat inside of YouTube that you can use if you want to ask questions. And I am monitoring it on another monitor here, and I'll try to take your questions during this podcast as well. So I wanted to give a few minutes to have people that wanted to connect and connected a little bit late to get involved here. I want to go ahead and tell you that this podcast normally comes out about every other Tuesday at about 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I know we're doing this at noon, and I realize this is Friday, which is about 6 p.m. in Europe. So most Europeans are probably, well, what would they be doing that's better than watching this show? I don't know. So like, screw you. No, if you are in Europe, I'm sure that you're watching this probably on Monday when you get back from work. So if you do, I still would like to get your input, and you can also I'll give you an email address. You can contact me, and we can continue talking about this. I think this is a subject that's not going to go away because we just had this same problem a few months ago with Taylor Swift. That's a very well-known problem. Everybody said, Taylor Swift took the internet down, and there was this same issue. And I know that myself, as well as a few colleagues of mine in the industry, have actually contacted Ticketmaster and said, hey, we would love to help you fix this problem. It's not about making the services money. It's about fixing this for the better of all mankind because we don't want mad Taylor Swift fans, right? But we have never received any kind of response or interest from Ticketmaster. That's troublesome. So this is another way to kind of reach out to you. So here we go. We're going to go start with the actual story itself. So I'm looking here at the comments. Welcome. We do have somebody from Europe, Perfluencer. Hey, Jacob, how you doing? And Marcus, hey, thanks for joining. Marcus is saying that the audio level is a little bit low. I've got it turned up. I'll turn it up just a little bit more, and you can tell me if this is any better. All right, so I don't want to blow everybody out of the water, but this is about as close as I can get. So let me know if that helps. So let's go right to the story. I've actually got this pulled up from an article online that says Ticketmaster is facing fans' anger because the demand was so high that it crashed the site. So there's multiple problems here. The first thing that happens is they get into this queue to buy the tickets. The queue takes a long time. Sometimes when they try to come out of the queue to actually buy the tickets, people get errors. Those that make it through to the next level see prices that are different because some of the tickets that they were trying to buy have already been sold out. And this has caused them to have dynamic ticket pricing. And in some cases, it more than doubled the ticket price. That's what people are angry about. And we'll get into more of this as we go. I've actually got the print screens of that. The latest article I saw yesterday from The Guardian, the UK paper, said that there is an entity called the Competition and Markets Authority, and they're now doing an official investigation into this dynamic pricing because they're now asking the question, did you really have a technical glitch that caused people to have to wait so long that tickets got sold out underneath them? And that's why you had to raise the prices, because supply and demand, scarcity of the ticket, you can charge more. Or was this manufactured? Did you mean to do this? Did you know this dynamic pricing was happening? I've seen some conversation online. I actually seen some comments from news articles recently saying that Ticketmaster is saying we didn't set the dynamic pricing. That comes from somebody else, referring to the band, like the band is making these price changes. The band is backing away from that and saying no, they've actually added a couple of new shows because of this. The estimate is that there were about, I guess, 1.2 million tickets throughout the whole tour for the reunion tour of Oasis, I think, and there was like 14 million people trying to buy tickets, which was like, I don't know, what, 25% of the whole UK population. So we know what that is. We know that that is bots. We are going to be talking about bots today quite a bit. Let's actually see what this looked like for people. So this is again screenshots that people who were actually buying tickets that day shared online. So this person was in the queue, and there's only 106,000 people ahead of me. What could go wrong? So this system that they use, my understanding is, it is a piece of software that's called Queueit, Queueit-, and the Queueit system is this front-end loaded waiting room that it puts users in. And the purpose for that is to keep the back-end servers from being overloaded and processing these tickets. Think of if you're standing in a line at the grocery store and they only have 2 lanes open, and all of a sudden there's a big rush, 2 buses full of people who want to buy groceries are lining up, and all of a sudden the manager freaks out and he starts calling everybody and opening up more registers. You can only have so many lanes. If he runs out of people to check people out at the cash register, there's going to be a line that forms. The longer that line is, the longer people have to wait. They're going to be frustrated, and there's going to be problems, right? This is exactly what they're trying to do here, is create that type of virtual waiting room queue. And it supposedly releases so many people at a certain length of time. There's a configuration setting. In other words, there's configuration settings that they use to control the queue, how many lanes they have open, how many can pass through at a given time. Some people are theorizing that that was not set properly and it was letting too many people through, and that is what's caused the backend servers to be overloaded. Here's an example of somebody who was on a 5G connected phone, 5G network. They got an unexpected error. The site is not reachable at the moment. Please try again. And so was that a network error because of the mobile network that maybe caused a glitch in the network? Was that actually the back-end servers or the front-end servers couldn't be reached because there was so much traffic on the front-end web server? Could be a combination of things, but it does bring up the fact that we have more and more transactions happening on mobile devices than ever. We predict probably over 70% this Black Friday, or the whole month of November, when you see those Black Friday sales for the holidays, probably going to be on mobile. Can you control that network? If you're riding in the back of a car trying to buy tickets from Ticketmaster on a mobile phone, you have no control over how many other cars are on that road that are using a phone, period, on that tower, which could have been a contributing factor of this problem, which is why you want to do testing on mobile devices. And you probably want to use something like WAN emulation, something like that, to have a poor network condition under test than just a lab environment that's pristine. We also see this, hang on, we're redirecting you to the checkout. So that's a whole nother part of this queuing system. This is a different person on this screen on a 4G network. They were told they have reserved too many tickets. You've exceeded the maximum numbers. Now, this is after waiting all this time to get through this queue. And sometimes I've heard people waiting 8 to 10 hours. This is the equivalent of lining up at a gate physically for a ticket gate, a concession to buy a ticket 3 days before the tickets go on sale, and you're camping out and you're in a tent and you're mad at the point where you're trying to buy this ticket and then you're told you're reserving too many. The other error they got was that your session has been suspended, and it's because the software thinks they are a bot. Either it thinks they're trying to log on too many times from two different devices, more devices than they should, or they have some type of other software installed that's trying to help them cheat or game the system, or it just thinks that they're a bot. So this tells us a couple of things. It tells us that their session length has to be extremely long for this site. For people to have to wait 8 to 10 hours, the session has to remain open on the servers. That consumes resources, that consumes memory. It makes the servers have to work harder the longer you keep the session open. And this is true also for shopping carts. So when you're shopping this Black Friday or you're on Amazon.com, every time they have to open a session for your shopping cart and keep those items in play, it's expensive, right? So there people are going to run into that again when they're shopping if it's not paid attention to. The second thing we know is they do have some type of bot detection software going on their site. There are multiple companies. I'll mention one towards the end of this broadcast that I am familiar with, but bot protection must be in place for a ticket site because there are so many people who want to scalp those tickets, and they want to use automated processes to go in and quickly purchase all these tickets, get them, and then resell them on the underground market, whatever you want to call it, for 10 times the price and make a lot of money. And there were people doing that. There were people buying the first really good seats, I don't know, for a few $100, maybe $300, $500, and then trying to turn around and sell them for $10,000 a couple of hours later when all of the tickets were sold out. That's what this is trying to avoid, is all these bots. So the bots are a big problem for Ticketmaster because that is going to consume so many resources. That is the equivalent of a denial of service attack that you would use when you're trying to take a site down. This would also be the equivalent of a stress test when you're using load testing tools and you remove all the think time and you just have as many virtual users as you can attack that site. It's the same thing. Bots are doing that, and they're fighting and competing for those server resources. So here is an example of somebody who went to buy tickets. When they first saw the tickets that they wanted, the price was £270 plus these service fees. So it came to £304 UK. The screen on the right was what they actually had to pay after waiting all this time in the queue because the dynamic pricing had kicked in and the prices were now more than double. And you can see to buy 2 tickets was $1,442. That's okay. So I'm not really a big fan of Oasis myself. I have actually done a parody song based on one of their songs. I'm going to play that towards the end of this thing. So if you haven't heard it, it's hilarious. That's the only song I know from Oasis. I wouldn't pay $1,500 to see my mom play with the symphony in London somewhere. Like, it's just not happening, dude. I guess it's because I'm a musician. I play the guitar. It's like, that's the first thing the college guys learn how to play is Wonderwall. Hey chicks, come over here. I can play. Never mind. It's another story. It's another life. Let's actually look at some of the errors that people were reporting on Twitter that they were getting as they were trying to buy tickets. Now, this tells us a lot because when you see a number on an error like this, error 503, that actually, that speaks to me because that is my favorite error of all time. Error 503, that is a status code that comes from the web server. It's based on the protocol HTTP and HTTPS that we use all the time when we're typing in URLs to our browser. And the numbers go from the 100 range to, I think it's maybe 600, 700. It's up there. It's above 500. But most of the time you will see in the 200 range, when you get a 200 status code, that's the HTTP protocol saying it was successful. You actually went to a web page, you typed in a URL, and you got the page, the resource that your browser wanted. It got it. You're fine. Everything's cool. Sometimes a 200 is saying it's good, and then you'll see an error on the screen, and that's because the developers did some fairy dust coding stuff to make it look like it's a status code of 200 that's good, while they're still displaying some kind of a JavaScript error or something in the background. That's a whole different conversation. But when you get into the 300 range, that usually is 301 and 302 temporary or permanent redirects. The web server is receiving a request and saying, I'm going to send you over here. Instead of giving you the resource you need, the resource you need is over here. I'm redirecting you to another place. So it makes another call. The 400 range is usually a problem with the client or the browser that's on your computer. It's having an issue. The most common one we know about is error 404, file not found. You went to you were looking for a web page, and the web page is no longer there. Maybe somebody deleted it, or maybe there is an image that used to be on that page that isn't there anymore. And it will say image not found or 404 not found. It's because your client had a problem trying to get something from the back end, and the back end is just going, I got nothing for you. I would give you what you wanted if you were asking for something right, but I don't have anything for you because you're not asking the right question. When you get to the 500 range, this is where it moves from the client having a problem, a browser having a problem, to the back end having a problem. So now the back end is saying, I am unavailable. I cannot service this. My service is down. I've received too many requests. There's many reasons why it cannot respond, but 500 is saying, I'm too busy to respond, or I'm unavailable to respond. The other thing about this error you'll see at the bottom, it says varnish cache server. Those of you who are familiar with Varnish know its function. If you have heard of a content delivery network, a CDN, maybe you've heard of Akamai, Cloudflare CDN, and this is where they will take copies of your static content and make copies and put it on servers all over the world. And whenever you type in a URL, it goes to pull that static content from the internet, and it will redirect them to the closest server, so it takes the least amount of time to pull that information up. It's compressed images. It is static files like CSS files, JavaScript files that don't change very often. Varnish is basically an in-house, homegrown, on-prem version of that, and that's its function. So let's look at what the error in Varnish means when it says 503 first byte timeout. Some of you who are familiar with, like if you're doing front-end performance testing, you're familiar with time to first byte. It's not actually the same thing here. So let me just read this to you. What does it mean when you get 503 first byte timeout error? Varnish has established a connection to the backend server, the origin server. It did not receive the first byte response back from the backend server in the configured amount of time. The backend server is taking too long to respond to that request after receiving a request for it from Varnish, and the default timeout is 60 seconds in Varnish. So for this application, if it's set to default, 60 seconds probably isn't a long enough time, honestly. That can be a problem. So the next error I saw was also a 503, but it was a different error coming from Varnish. And this says 503, let me show you the screen, 503 backend max con reach. So that stands for maximum connections. Now let me read you what that error means. This means that the maximum number of current connections to the backend server has been reached. Varnish attempted to make a request to that backend, but it has hit a connection limit. So this is not a timeout limit, this is a connection limit. By default, this setting in Varnish is 200 connections per Varnish cache node. I don't know how many nodes they have there, but that's the default. So it usually indicates that the backend server is overwhelmed with requests, it cannot handle the load, or the connection limit is set too low for the amount of traffic volume that you're experiencing normally. The backend server is responding too slowly, which means it may not be hefty enough. It may not have enough CPU or memory to do the job that it should be doing. So obviously you would need to take steps to prevent that. During the time of the Oasis Ticketmaster issue in the UK, somebody did a lookup on Google Trends to see how often the term error 503 was being looked for. And let me move my picture here out of the way so you can see the hockey stick that happens there. Now, we would see this during a load test if we were running and all of a sudden we hit a wall and all of a sudden the timings went crazy. That's what you would expect to see. Or let's say that you maxed out a CPU on a server and all of a sudden this is the kind of thing you would see. But these are people making requests asking, what the heck is error 503 Google? And so they wanted to know. So apparently a lot of people were receiving this is what that means. Now, here's something we can't ignore. If we were talking about Bob's Meat Shack and Pokemon card dealer down the street, this would be totally different. But this is the revenue from 2006 to 2023 for Live Nation, who is the owner of Ticketmaster. That's right, 2023, 22.75 billion with a B dollars. Now, out of that, how much of that comes from Ticketmaster? It's estimated that it's between $2 and $3 billion, probably more than that this year. So, this is not a company that is not that is too small to do something about their technology problem. That's the way that I'll frame that. This is a company that has the money to investigate and fix this issue if they want to fix it. That is my opinion. I will stop with that. And now I want to look at the fundamental issues that I've identified in this. So I am at this point going to bring on a special guest that I have, and his name is Brian Cole, and he is the Senior Director of Customer Engineering at Tricentis, who is all too familiar with this problem. Brian, are you there, buddy?
I sure am.
And
How are you, Scott?
you've been listening to me drone on about this.
I have.
Did you see this happen? What was your reaction?
I'm not. I haven't caught up with the Oasis Ticketmaster incident because, like you, I'm not an Oasis fan. But certainly, this has happened to them before, right? And it's one of those sad cases where, when you look at the industry across the industry, it keeps happening over and over and over and over again, and you never hear the opposite stories as well. This is one of the things that I like to say: good performance is invisible. You will hear about Amazon when they accidentally delete an S3 bucket and bring down a third of the internet. That happened to them a number of years ago. But you never hear about Amazon.com was running great today and everybody got a great experience. And it's an important example because people will say things like, well, yes, Ticketmaster is having technical issues servicing the need for the large consumer base coming at them, but it's such a large base that they have different challenges. Yeah, sure, but Amazon still has a larger customer footprint that is dealing with their sites and servers. This is a problem that can be solved and addressed using technology. To your point.
I see this as three problems, and specifically for Ticketmaster and Live Nation, we have an industry problem first before we get into the technology things. And here's the way I will say this to stay out of trouble. Somebody came to me one time because I lived in Nashville for 20 years, and they said, Scott, the music industry itself is about as close to the mob as you can get. And I went, no way. And then they said, go to Google and just look up the word payola. And then start reading some autobiographies of people who have already died who had nothing to lose, and they wrote about their life in the music business. So I did, and it's very surprising. Well, it wasn't surprising because I lived in Nashville, but we're dealing with an industry that notoriously has had some run-ins with the law, kind of like when Vegas got started and they were controlled in the 70s and 80s, and there was a lot of mob activity. So if you start looking up payola, if you start looking at the 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 pros, the PROs, which is the way that the songwriters and publishers get paid, BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, start trying to find out how much transparency they have about how they collect money and how they pay money, pay the artists and the songwriters. It's so we've got that issue, and we also have an issue where they're about as close to a monopoly as you can get because Live Nation is the largest. Like they manage all these bands, and that's who they're going to sell through is Ticketmaster. So it's like the cost of switching if a band wants to sell tickets is very very high. There is nobody else, right?
Well, and that's the point exactly. There is nobody else, right? It's not even a question of I don't want to deal with Ticketmaster, it's nobody else can handle the volumes out there that Ticketmaster can. And to your first point, it's a classic example of if you leave people alone and give them the motivation of I want to make as much money as possible and put no other constraints on it, bad things are going to happen. Consumers are going to suffer. This is why there are regulations and rules. This is why you're not allowed to dump toxic chemicals into the water supply, because there's rules for that, because otherwise companies would do that. So when you start looking at the investigations that are beginning to creep in on Ticketmaster, this is a great example of an organization that maybe hasn't had a lot of oversight and a lot of accountability in terms of their service to the consumer. And now that maybe is going to start to change, and maybe that'll drive a different behavior from them. And that's exactly what we see. That's the point of regulation, is to change people's behaviors and get them to do better, to serve a better role in society.
We also have this thing where it's also a business problem, right? When we talk about a monopoly and we say, well, there's nobody else, but if somebody was able to go in and actually look at the technology stack here, um, just from a business perspective, doesn't it make more sense to have happy concert ticket buying, a public that loves them and wants to buy more tickets from them? It seems to me that they would sell more tickets if everybody loved to buy tickets from Ticketmaster, right? So it's like,
So,
aren't they seeing the business through the wrong lens?
yes and no. Generally, that is a true statement that happy customers buy more of whatever your product is. But with Ticketmaster in particular, it is a finite resource. It is tightly bound. That concert venue is going to host Taylor Swift or Oasis or whomever on this date. It is as big as it is, and that's it. So they are very much in a different space than, say, an online retailer would be, where sure, yeah, you want to buy more of widget number 14? We're out, but we'll order more and we'll fulfill all these orders, right? That's not at all the case with concerts. So I do understand they have a very different market position. I also firmly believe that Ticketmaster has a performance engineering team filled with dedicated professionals doing their very, very best. But I don't believe that they are receiving kind of the executive support that they need in order to really invest in solving this problem, because it keeps coming up. The repetition is sort of the canary in the coal mine here, that they are probably struggling internally, and I feel for them, but I also don't. You had this with Taylor Swift in November, and now you're having it again with Oasis here in September the following year. If it happens again, where were you the first time? Right? I remember making fun of Best Buy back in the day because in 2014 they went down on Black Friday. In 2015 they went down on Black Friday for largely the same reasons. But I haven't heard about anything from Best Buy since.
Right.
Good job, you guys solved it.
It's it's one of these things where when I think about, like, because I'm not really a big concert goer. I don't go to a lot of concerts. I guess because I play music. I don't need to. I just play the music. But um, if this is so public that everybody knows about it, the IT department would have to like want to rise up internally and say, look, I don't want to be blamed for this, because if I'm the performance engineer at Ticketmaster, do I want to put on my resume or my LinkedIn profile that I worked at Ticketmaster during these outages? Would you want to hire somebody that worked during that time and had multiple failures underneath them? I'm just playing devil's advocate. I don't know, but maybe it's just a big deal because it's so
It
public, I
is.
guess.
And
Um,
it's not great for organizational reputation, which we've seen in the media, right? Ticketmaster has been uh, exposed to the fury of the consumer base. And that is increasingly becoming a common refrain. And that's why I believe regulators are now starting to take note and take action, because the people are starting to rise up and say, this is not okay.
so when people say to me, when I hear companies, especially executives, say, well, performance isn't a priority here, performance isn't important to us because we have other things we have to do before we deal with performance. And then you see this kind of thing happen. Don't tell me performance isn't important to a brand. Don't tell me performance isn't important to your reputation. It is, and this is an example. So
Quality sort of sits on three main pillars, right? And everybody understands the functional pillar. It's the most obvious type of testing. If I click the button should do what it's supposed to do, and I should get the proper result on the screen. It's
Yep.
very clear, very easy to understand. Everybody understands functional testing. Performance and security are those other two pillars. And when you neglect them, you get yourself into these positions. Either you're talking about a big data breach because you didn't have the right security practices in place, or you have these types of news articles about the performance failures of your applications that have damaged your brand and your reputation. And it happens across every industry constantly. You can do a new search basically any week of the year from now until whenever, and you will find stories about failures of IT software to support internet traffic. And I wish there was a great answer for this, right? Everybody's applications are very different. They all have very different challenges and unique constraints that they have to operate under. I don't know some of the internal pressures that managing ticket sales really does, but I know from a consumer perspective, it's not a pleasant experience to be waiting in line for 8 hours expecting to pay $300 for tickets to find out that they're $1,500, or waiting in line for 8 hours to be told, yeah, you look like a bot, so out you go, and I have to restart that process. That would be, both of those scenarios are deeply upsetting. And that's the type of stuff that hopefully a dedicated effort with some executive sponsorship will start to address, if for no other reason than to turn the ire of the regulators away from themselves. Uh, Hopefully they'll rise to the occasion.
And Ticketmaster, if you are watching or you work for Ticketmaster, we know a guy. Okay, I'm just saying. We'll help you. Okay, so let's get back to this. The final issue is the technology issue, and that's the easiest for us. But I wanted to mention those two. So let's go to that, back to that slide, and let's talk about. I came up with these 8 things. Like, again, not knowing what's going on with Ticketmaster internally, I don't know their stack. If I were to just outline these 8 areas that I could come up with of what we need to look at or things that we could have done better or we need to address, here are the things. Obviously, there needs to be more capacity planning. There needs to be more modeling done for future ticket uh, events that are going to happen of this magnitude. I'm wondering about how much their load testing is helping them, if they're doing any of it, because there are, you hear people say we do load testing, but we still have issues in production. So I always have to come back and question, what does your load testing look like? Is it actually testing the things that people are actually doing? Is it just following some happy path that some other functional QA person put down as a test script? Are you actually mimicking what real life would be? I would be trying to mimic the Oasis problem, that event. I would try to mimic that day as close as I possibly could with all factors involved, including network issues with mobile devices, et cetera, et cetera. And I would try to recreate the problem as much as I could. Are they doing that? Do they have the skills to do that? Some people think that they do, and we go in as consultants and we look and we go, dude, like you're using JMeter that's set to not even pull down any static content. Well, we don't need static content. Well, apparently your varnish server might be a problem. So it could be a problem with the way it's busting through cache. So why don't we test that as well? You know? And Brian, if you want to jump in here, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, really, of all of these, the biggest procedural problem that I see for performance engineering teams is the first one, that they are now reliant on the line of business to accurately predict demand for them. A great example of this not working so great came in 2006 when Intuit had a very rigorous internal performance testing practice. They business expected 2.3 times growth in the number of e-filing tax submissions that year. They tested for 3.8, built out the infrastructure to support that, and then when it came time for tax season, the actual number was closer to 11.8.
mm-hmm,
And the US government had to extend the tax filing deadline that year because Intuit crashed and crashed hard. What do? As a performance engineer, you went 50% beyond the worst case projections the business gave you, but the business was just wrong. And
mm-hmm,
that's deeply troubling. Ticketmaster is not in this space. That is not the problem they have. They know exactly how many seats there are in every stadium. They know exactly when the concerts are. The finite nature of the resource tells them exactly how much they're going to need to be able to serve. And they've got a lot of experience with people doing the virtual equivalent of lining up 3 days beforehand in their tent, waiting for the concessions to open. So that one, I don't know that I agree as a problem that Ticketmaster should be facing. What their load testing practices are, I have questions.
Yeah,
Same as you,
yeah.
because the repetition is sort of again that red flag that tells me, well, maybe they need to do an analysis there.
Well, I'm not going to drain this slide and go through every single bullet point because I know a lot of the people who are watching, you're already performance engineers. You've probably already identified these as well, and you could talk to them as much as me and Brian could. But one thing I do want to mention is they have a bot problem. They know there is a bot problem, uh,
Yeah,
and that needs to be dealt with. And that would be the first thing because if you can get that outer layer working really well, if you can get rid of the bad bots, still allow the good bots, and identify people that are not bots, that are real people, and just getting the audits you want, you take a tremendous load off of your server's front end immediately. That's number one. And then the second thing would be to really look at every piece of your architecture and try to tune that, doing load testing on each tier individually if you can, and then as a whole, do all these different types of scenarios. That's what I'd be doing. And I would be looking for a bottleneck at every stage during that time. And I'd be putting a close eye on it. But
absolutely.
it's
I mean,
not
I
something.
can't agree with that more. Right? Is the idea of I'm going to build an automobile, so I'm going to fully assemble the car and then begin testing to see its performance characteristics. No, absolutely not. You test the drivetrain. You test not even the drivetrain, the individual components of the engine. And then you assemble the engine, you test the engine, and then you connect it to the drivetrain to test those components working together. And all of these subsystems get tested individually before it gets to that full road test. And what this does is very transformational for a performance engineering effort. It changes it from a discovery exercise of what are the performance characteristics and where the problems are to a validation that we did indeed build good performance into the system. And now we verify that we do have the outcome that we want. That is a very different experience, and it's much more positive for everybody, for the line of business, for the performance engineers, for the C suite. Everybody likes that second one much better than the first.
So from a bot perspective, that we know that they have some kind of protection. I would probably look at Cloudflare. I would partner with them. I've used them for years, and a lot of people who do. Cloudflare has staved off some huge denial of service attacks, and when they have a problem and they overcome that problem, they do this volume. They give you so much information about what caused the problem, what they did about it, and what they're going to make sure it never happens again. It's like a book when they're done with it. They tell you all the technical nitty gritty details, and that helps other vendors as well, even competition, do better. And bot protection is one of the things. And they're not a sponsor of the show or anything, but I do recommend them because they have this. They have a way of protecting you against bots that's not just CAPTCHA based; it's behavioral based. And some of the rules that you would put in place would be like, if I know that there's a string of IP addresses or a range of IP addresses that I know are AWS servers, it's not coming from people. It's coming from servers. I can block those guys. If something is hitting my site too quick for it to be a mouse click because it's doing it so fast a human couldn't do it, behaviorally I know I can eliminate those things. So there's ways you can do it without having to put up how many cars do you see in this picture, and you have to there's better ways to do it.
And it's going to be a continuing arms race that's going to take place as AI tools start to get better and better. The bots are going to get more sophisticated, but so are the defenses against bot protection, and they're going to go back and forth.
Right, right. And so here's something else. Is this a situation? Is this business model for selling tickets a good use case for having queues at all? Is this a case where you go, you got to have queues? Because I would argue if they're, let's say that they needed to process 1.2 million ticket sales through a back end in 2 hours. There are very large systems from governments, from large Fortune 500 companies that do way more transactions than that, and they don't have queues. So, what's making them special?
The I don't want to get myself into trouble either, but it seems like a way to kind of adjust pricing based on demand. And instead of having a product that you sell for a known quantity, you have a very limited resource and you are going to price that based on the demand for that resource. So if you want to see Taylor Swift in concert or Oasis in concert, it's going to cost you. And it's going to cost you more if everybody in Canada wants to go see that versus everybody in the United States, which is much more. So I do understand that. I vastly would prefer, as a consumer, a this is how much the ticket costs. If you want to buy it, click here and get it. Like buying movie theater tickets do not have surge pricing like Ticketmaster does. But there's a lot more movie theaters, and the movie can be run multiple times and will show many times. That is not a singular one-time event. So I do understand their business model and the way that works the way that it does, but I also feel like as a consumer, this is probably why I don't go to a lot of concerts.
Yeah. So you can just put on the CD. I'm aging myself with CD. You just stream it,
CD.
right? What's a CD by everybody under 20 years old, right? Um, I want to give a shout out to a guy named Mike Lowe in the UK, and I want to actually bring this up. I'm not. This site is called Q Fair, and the system that Ticketmaster uses is called Qit. But Q Fair, I guess, would be a competitor to that. He was all over LinkedIn the same day that I was, that was bringing out that this was a problem, and they were saying, if they had been our customer, this would not have happened. We would have prevented them from crashing. Which he's not a prophet; he doesn't know that, but he's saying we would be on the phone, we would have a war room, whatever. On this day, we would have made sure, we would have held their hands to make sure that they did not go down. And he's been talking about it a lot. He had some very good points that he made on LinkedIn on some of the postings. So I'm just giving him a shout out and saying, hey, if you're in a ticketing model or you think you need a queue, check out Q Fair and see. Again, they're not a sponsor, just something I wanted to bring out there. That's pretty much the show today, and I want to basically give a shout out to everybody who connected during this time. So we've got Marcus and Jacob and Matthew, Brian Billingsley. Hey, how you doing, man? Joey Hendricks. A lot of European people with nothing to do on Friday nights. What the freak is wrong with you? Um, but yeah, thank you so much for joining. There's a lot of good comments in here. I wish that we could get to them, but we cannot. If another thing I would like to just go ahead and bring, thank you, Brian, for being on the show. This was awesome. You're welcome back anytime. We're going to be talking. We should go ahead and do a plug on that. On September the 26th, we are going to be doing a webinar together with Tricentis on problems with retail, preparing for Black
Retail
Friday,
readiness.
point load events.
The holiday season's coming. How do you get prepared for it?
Yeah, so if you see our feed on LinkedIn, either one of us, you should see a link to that. Register for that. We'll be getting into more about this. I'm sure we'll bring up some of the same stuff, but we'll be able to get into more detail. So thank you again, Brian, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Cheers.
All right. So, friends, if you are getting a 503 error and you're really having a problem, don't be disgusted. What you should do is turn that into lemonade, right? Instead of coffee, I should say. If you want the 503 blend coffee, it's the best coffee you'll ever have. It's the Performance Tour coffee. We have it in whole bean, ground, and now in K cups as well. Let me shine it in the light. Oh, it doesn't work. Anyway, you should buy my coffee. That's what I'm saying. I gave that to some people at the ETLS conference in Las Vegas. I was passing out free samples, and the people who have been trying it, including Nyasha, who was at she's Tricentis Marketing. She was handling the booth. She actually bought a Keurig machine for this, and she goes, "I don't know how I ever live without it." So thank you, Nyasha. You've proven my point. My coffee's the best. What else can I talk about here? This podcast, smcjournal.com. Let me tell you how you can get in touch with me. I told you if you wanted to send me an email, you could. My email address is heyscott@smcjournal.com. I love to hear your feedback, especially those of you who are watching after this airs live. Just tell me your thoughts about it, and we may start another discussion on LinkedIn. If you want to contact me in other ways, it's very easy. I'm on a lot of different networks, the social networks, but LinkedIn is probably my primary place you can reach me. You could also scan that QR code. It would be great if you also liked this channel on YouTube and tell that YouTube algorithm that my content is worth watching, and that would motivate me to actually make more shows about stuff like this. And I would like to do more live streams because I would like to get more interaction with you. So thanks again, everybody, for watching. So before I leave, if you did not get Oasis tickets, I'm sorry that you were not able to get them. Hopefully they'll open up more shows. Maybe if you're watching from Ticketmaster, if we can help you, I mean, honestly, in all seriousness, if you are looking for help with performance engineering, I would be willing to help you. And I have a whole network of people that I know that would be willing to jump in and help you and fix this problem so you would not have this kind of an outage in the future. But if you're not going to be attending the concert and you would just like to enjoy Oasis music over and over again, you can watch my parody video called Firewall that's based on Oasis Wonderwall. And we will leave the broadcast with that video. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Scott Moore saying bye bye.